That cash in your wallet or, the numbers you see in your bank app seems simple enough, right?
Yeah, on the surface.
But if it's just paper or bits of code, why does it actually work? I mean, what's the magic ingredient giving it value?
That's really the core question, isn't it? And when you start digging into it, you find some really surprising things about how our whole financial system is built.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We're doing a deep dive today into fiat currency. That's money not backed by like gold or silver.
Exactly. And that immediately brings up that confusion you mentioned. If it's not backed by something tangible, why do we all just accept it?
Right. What's our mission here today then?
Well, our mission is really to get a solid grip on what fiat currency is, and maybe even more crucially, what it means when a government has monetary sovereignty.
Monetary sovereignty sounds powerful.
It really is. Think of it like understanding the control panel for a pretty potent economic engine. And I think exploring this will probably challenge some common ideas you might have about money. It exposes some, well, fascinating realities.
All right, I'm ready. Let's start with the basics. What exactly is fiat currency? The word fiat itself sounds a bit official.
It does, yeah. But fiat here just means it's money because the government says it's money. It's established by government decree by law.
Ah, okay, so it's linked to the term legal tender.
Precisely. Legal tender means that, by law, this currency must be accepted to settle debts. Debts between people, but also, and this is key, debts owed to the government, especially taxes.
Okay, taxes. So back to that initial head scratcher.
Ah,
Why do we accept it if it's just paper or a number on a screen? Why do we trade real stuff for it?
this is where it gets really interesting. A very powerful explanation comes from something called the state theory of money, or sometimes chartalism.
Chartalism.
And the core idea, the slogan almost, is taxes drive money.
Taxes drive money. That feels backwards. Don't you need the money before you can pay taxes?
That's the intuitive way to think, yeah, but the theory flips it. Think about this dad dollars or mom moolah analogy. It works quite well.
Okay, I'm listening.
Imagine a parent creates their own little paper coupons, right? Family fun bucks. At first, they're just bits of paper.
Worthless paper.
Right. But then the parent says, okay, kids, to get your allowance this week or screen time privileges, whatever, you need to pay me a tax of 10 fun bucks.
Suddenly those bucks aren't worthless.
Exactly. The kids now need those fun bucks to pay their dues to the parent. The parent, acting like the government, creates a demand for their specific currency by requiring it for tax payments.
So we accept government money, pounds, dollars, euros, because ultimately we know we, or someone, will need it to pay taxes owed to that government. That makes a
Yeah.
surprising amount of sense.
It does, doesn't it? Warren Mosler, an economist associated with MMT, often uses similar analogies. The government imposes a tax liability payable only in its currency, and boom, demand is created.
Wow. Any real-world examples of this?
Oh, absolutely. Think about colonial history. European powers often went into Africa or Asia and imposed, say, a hut tax or a poll tax. And crucially, these taxes had to be paid in the colonizer's currency, not in local goods or currencies. This forced the local population to work for the colonizers or sell goods to them just to get the specific money they needed to pay the tax. It literally forced them into the colonial monetary system.
That's a powerful, if rather grim, illustration. Okay, so taxes drive money. You also mentioned monetary sovereignty as this sort of economic superpower. What gives a country that status?
Right, monetary sovereignty, it's a really important position to be in economically speaking, and it basically comes down to meeting three key conditions. Think of it like a checklist.
A checklist? Good. I like checklists. What's item number one?
First, the government has to issue its own unique fiat currency. It's the monopoly issuer. Sounds obvious, maybe, but it's fundamental. They control the creation of that specific money.
Got it. Sole source. What's number two?
Second, it needs to have a floating exchange rate. This means the currency's value isn't fixed or pegged to gold or another country's currency. Its price on the global market just floats based on supply and demand.
So no promise to exchange it for, say, a fixed amount of dollars or gold?
Exactly. The government doesn't guarantee a fixed conversion rate. And third, and this is really important,
Yes.
the government must have no significant debt denominated in a foreign currency. Almost all its borrowing should be in its own currency, the one it issues.
Why is owing debt in your own currency so critical? What's the risk otherwise?
Well, imagine a country mainly uses its own currency, let's say the peso, but it owes billions in US dollars. It has to earn or borrow those US dollars somehow. maybe through exports, just to pay back its debt. It becomes dependent on getting that foreign currency. It's a major vulnerability.
I see. So if you owe debt in the currency you yourself create.
Then you can always create the means to pay that debt. It's a fundamentally different situation.
Okay, so which countries tick these boxes? Who has this superpower?
Good examples are the U.S. with the dollar, Japan with the yen, the U.K. with the pound, Canada, Australia. They all issue their own currency, float it, and primarily owe debt in it.
And who doesn't have it?
Well, think about countries in the Eurozone, like France or Germany. They use the euro, right?
Right.
But the French or German government doesn't issue the euro. The European Central Bank does. So for their national budgets, they function more like currency users. They can, in theory, run out of euros if their borrowing costs get too high or markets refuse to lend.
Ah, interesting distinction. Any others?
Also, any country that pegs its currency firmly to another, like some countries pegging to the US dollar, they aren't fully sovereign in this sense because maintaining that peg limits their policy independence. They always need to manage their reserves of the currency they're pegged to.
Okay, got it. So let's say a country is monetarily sovereign, ticks all three boxes. What's the big deal? What does the superpower actually let them do?
This is where it gets really counterintuitive for many people. The biggest implication is that there's no intrinsic financial constraint on government spending in its own currency.
No financial constraint. What does that mean? They can just spend infinitely.
Not infinitely, because there are other constraints we'll get to, but they can always afford anything that is for sale in their own currency. They are the source of that currency.
How? Is it just like printing money?
It's more like crediting bank accounts. Ben Bernanke, when he was Fed chair, put it quite simply. He said the Fed uses computers to mark up the size of the account that the government keeps with it. When the government spends, the Fed just credits the recipient's bank account. It's keystrokes.
So, they don't actually need to collect taxes or borrow money before they can spend.
That's one of the most challenging but central insights from MMT, modern monetary theory. They argue the sequence is actually spend first, then tax or borrow. The government spending creates the money that then flows through the economy.
And some of that money flows back as taxes, or people use it to buy government bonds.
Exactly. The spending financially enables the taxing and borrowing that follows.
Okay, my brain is slightly rewired now.
Yeah.
If the government can always create the money, what stops them just spending wildly? What are the limits then?
The limits are very real, but they aren't financial. They are real resource limits.
Real resources, like what?
Like the availability of workers, factories, raw materials, energy, technology, the actual productive capacity of the economy.
Okay.
If the government tries to spend too much money into an economy that's already running at full tilt, using all its available resources, well, you just get inflation. Too much money chasing too few goods and services.
So inflation is the real constraint.
Yeah.
The kryptonite to this superpower.
Precisely. The government's spending power is limited by the real economy's ability to absorb that spending without prices spiraling upwards. Managing inflation becomes the key challenge, not finding the money.
So it's about balancing the economy, not balancing the books in the same way a household does.
That's a great way to put it. Warren Mosler uses another helpful analogy here. The government, as currency issuer, is like the scorekeeper at a football game. Does the scorekeeper ever run out of points to award? No, of course not. They just change the numbers on the scoreboard. The government crediting accounts is like the scorekeeper updating the score. The points themselves aren't a finite resource for the scorekeeper.
That actually makes it very clear. The issuer just keeps score. Okay. Now, you mentioned a hierarchy of money earlier. Can you sketch that out?
Sure. It helps to think of money existing in layers, like a pyramid. At the very top, the base layer is what we call state money.
State money. What's included there?
That's physical cash, the coins and notes issued by the central bank or treasury, and crucially, the digital reserves that commercial banks hold in their accounts at the central bank. This is the ultimate settlement medium in the banking system.
Right. The foundational money. What's the next level down?
Below that, you have bank money. This is mostly what we use day to day. It's the digital deposits held in our accounts at commercial banks like Barclays or Chase or wherever.
So my checking account balance is bank money.
Exactly. And importantly, this bank money is generally convertible on demand into state money. You can go to an ATM and get cash, right? That's converting bank money to state money. And when banks settle payments between themselves, They ultimately use those reserves they hold at the central bank state money again.
So bank money relies on being convertible into state money.
Yes, that convertibility promise is key to its acceptance. And then below that, you have other layers of IOUs, other promises to pay, but state money as the foundation.
Understood. State money at the top, bank money below, all resting on the state's authority.
Pretty much, yeah.
So this brings us to another distinction you raised earlier, which sounds really important. Currency issuers versus currency users.
Yes, this is absolutely fundamental to understanding everything we've discussed.
Okay, define them for us. Who's who?
The currency issuer is the entity that creates the currency. For a monetarily sovereign nation, that's the national government, working through its treasury and central bank.
So scorekeeper.
The scorekeeper, exactly. They issue the points. Because they issue it, they cannot involuntarily go broke in their own currency. They operate under different rules. They make the rules, in a sense.
Okay. And currency users, that's everyone else.
Pretty much. That's individuals like you and me, businesses, state and local governments, even national governments that don't issue their own currency, like those in the Eurozone we talked about.
And what's the key difference in how they operate?
Currency users have to get the currency first, earn it, borrow it, receive it as a gift before they can spend it. We face real budget constraints. Our bank accounts can hit zero. We play by the rules set by the issuer.
So confusing these two, thinking the government budget works just like a household budget, is a major mistake.
It's probably the single biggest source of confusion in economic policy debates. Applying currency user logic to a currency issuer leads to flawed thinking about debt, deficits, and what's possible for government policy.
Right. Wow. Okay, this has been, well, a very deep dive indeed. My perspective has definitely shifted. Let's try and summarize the big takeaways.
Good idea. So first takeaway. Fiat currency, the money we use daily, gets its value not from gold backing, but because the government demands it for tax payments. Remember? Taxes drive money.
Got it. Taxes drive money. Second,
Monetary sovereignty is a specific status. It requires issuing your own currency, having a floating exchange rate, and owing minimal debt in foreign currency. This status gives a government unique financial capability.
unique capabilities, like the third takeaway.
Exactly. Third takeaway. A monetarily sovereign government isn't financially constrained in its own currency like a household or business is. It spends by crediting accounts. The real limits are resource availability and the risk of inflation.
Real limits, not financial ones.
Okay.
And the final key point.
And finally, always distinguish between currency issuers like the U.S. federal government who create the currency and currency users like us, businesses, local governments who must obtain the currency before spending. They operate under fundamentally different constraints.
Issuer versus user. Crucial distinction. Understanding that really changes how you hear politicians talk about budgets, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It provides a whole new lens for evaluating economic discussions and policies.
Well, I definitely feel like I've gained some economic superpowers of understanding myself. Thanks so much. This was fascinating.
My pleasure. It's complex stuff, but getting the foundations right is key.
Absolutely. Now, for all of you listening, hopefully feeling a bit more monetarily savvy, our next deep dive is going to tackle something directly related: government budgeting. We'll be digging into the myths of taxes, borrowing, and solvency.
Oh, that'll be a good one. Lots of myths to bust there.
Definitely get ready for some serious myth busting. Until then, spend wisely, especially if you're a currency user. And may your exchange rates float freely.